Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, which is the applications and benefits of GIS for housing. We're hoping the content we cover today will be useful for everyone, but we're hoping it will be especially useful for those of you who are either new to GIS or new to housing. We will still have a demo today, so don't worry if you're more of a GIS veteran. There'll be lots of interesting use case examples for you to look at, as well as a preview of some new data sets available from the Ordnance Survey. Before we begin, we'll be sending the recording, so don't worry about making too many notes. Please submit any questions you have in the questions panel. You should be able to see this now at the top of your screen. At the end of the session, we'll answer as many of those questions as we possibly can. There will be a survey at the end where you'll be able to submit any feedback on the webinar. We're always really interested to hear what you think, so please make sure you fill that in so that we can continue to make our webinars as useful and as informative as possible. You're in listen-only mode today, so we can't hear you. But as I said, please make use of the question panel if you have any questions, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end of today. The runtime is about 45 to 50 minutes, so we should be all wrapped up by around 12 o'clock, just in time for lunch. So the presenters today, my name is George and I'm a business development manager at CAD Corp. What this means is that I work with our housing customers to help them maximise their investment in GIS by advising them on their GIS setup and by telling them about all of the products and services we provide. I'm pleased to be joined by my co-presenter Simon. Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, George. Good morning, everybody. My name's Simon Parker. I'm the pre-sales team leader at CAD Corp. And yeah, later on in this webinar, I'll be sharing some practical examples of using GIS with a live software demonstration.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon. So a bit about CAD Corp. So we are a UK-based GIS software development company, and we create a family of geospatial software that includes desktop-based and web-based mapping. In addition to this, we also supply our customers with Ordnance Survey data and provide them with technical consultancy when required. Land and property or housing is one of our key markets, but we also do a lot of work with customers from other sectors like the emergency services, energy, government and finance. We think this really benefits us, as by speaking to customers from multiple sectors, we develop a more well-rounded understanding of GIS and how it can be used. By passing these ideas on from our other sectors onto our housing customers, we make sure that our housing customers get a really good understanding of GIS and how it can be used as well. As I said though, housing is still one of our main markets. We currently work with around 30 different housing associations, a selection of which you can see on your screen at the moment. Over the years, we've built up a lot of experience with these organisations. There's a real mix of customers here, some managing just a few thousand properties and others managing up to 50 to 100,000. What this really shows is that organisations of all sizes can benefit from GIS and web mapping. All organisations are obviously different, but a lot of the challenges they face are the same. And as you'll see shortly, we think a lot of these challenges are challenges that can be solved by GIS. So a little bit more about CAD Corp. As I said, we develop a family of GIS software that includes desktop-based and web-based mapping. The web and mobile applications are designed to be really intuitive and easy to use. You don't need to have a degree in GIS or be a technical whiz to use them. It's just like using any other web page, but you're accessing the really powerful technology and functionality that sits behind it in CAD Corp's desktop. Developing our own software is something that's really important to us, because it means we can control our own development cycle. This gives us the flexibility to respond to customer requests for new features and optimizations far more quickly than if we were relying on a third party. All our software can be cloud hosted and managed by CAD Corp or installed locally. Rather than forcing our customers one way or the other, we like to give our customers the option to decide what works best for them. CAD Corp are an Ordnance Survey premium partner, which means that we're licensed to supply OS data to our customers. This integration with the OS is really important because it means that our products are tailor-made to work with OS data. By licensing OS data, we're also able to serve as a one-stop shop for our customers, where they can purchase their GIS software and data from one supplier rather than having to manage multiple contracts with multiple different suppliers. We design our software to be as interoperable as possible. This really benefits our housing customers in particular, as they're able to easily access the wealth of data and information they have stored in their housing management systems directly from within CAD Corp SIS. So our agenda today. So I'm going to start off at the very beginning by explaining what GIS is and what it means. We'll then look at some of the ways that GIS and web mapping will help your organisation before moving on to a live demo part of a session with Simon, where he'll show you some real life examples and data sets that demonstrate how your organisation can get a real benefit from GIS and web mapping. We'll then come back to me at the end, where we'll run through any questions you might have. So before we get started, we're just going to run a quick poll, which should be appearing on your screen in a second. And the poll question we have is, what stage are you at on your GIS journey? So are you completely new to GIS? You might know a bit about GIS, but haven't got a system in place yet. You might have GIS in place, but you're fairly new to it or not using it that much. Or you might have had GIS in place for a number of years and it's used extensively throughout your business. So we'll just give you a few moments to respond to that. Okay, good. So we've got a really good response to that. So what we're seeing with results is quite a lot of you who are either completely new to GIS, or you might know a little bit about it, but you haven't really got any system in place at the moment, which is perfect. So hopefully today you'll see some really good examples of what GIS is and get a bit more of an understanding of how it can be used. We've also got a lot of people who are they have a system in place, but they haven't really used it that much yet, which is really good. Hopefully some of the examples we show will give you an impetus and give you some new ideas about how you can use the system. And finally, we've got a few people with GIS in place and they use it quite a lot. So these are our GIS pros, which is really good. As I say, there should be some good use case examples for you as well to see in the demo, and also some new data sets to enjoy. So what is GIS? So GIS stands for Geographical Information System. And what that means is it's a platform for visualizing, analyzing, and creating spatial data. Spatial data being any type of information that has an attribute that places it somewhere on the Earth's surface. So this could be an address, a postcode, or a set of coordinates. It's probably more ingrained in your day-to-day life than you would imagine. I'm sure if you were all to look in your phone now, you'd find at least one, probably more, of these apps. All of these apps use location data, so all of these apps are an example of a GIS. These apps are obviously great and really, really useful, but what they don't do is they don't allow you to visualize your own data in your own maps. This is where CAD Corp comes in. It allows you to view your own data, so your property addresses or your grounds maintenance patches, in your own bespoke maps the way you want the data to be presented. GIS is more than a pretty map though. Knowing where your properties are opens up the world of spatial analysis, which means you can ask questions of your data that you can't with simple attribute queries alone. Examples of GIS questions that are commonly asked by housing associations include, are any of our properties in a flood zone? How big is that patch of grass? Who owns that building? Do any nearby properties also need a new boiler? Where are our open repair jobs? And where is antisocial behaviour happening? In a second, we'll come to how you ask those questions. The important thing to know so far is what GIS is and what spatial data is. So your spatial data is anything with a location attached, so your properties, your grounds maintenance patches, whilst your GIS is the platform for visualizing and analyzing this data. So now you've got a good idea of what GIS is, we're going to move on to the next part of today, where we'll look at some of the ways that GIS and web mapping will help your housing association by looking at 4 common use case scenarios. These are visualizing stock, identifying land ownership, negotiating grounds maintenance contracts, and locating flood risk. So visualizing stock. Even if you don't have GIS at the moment, you've probably at some point loaded your properties into Google Maps or Bing Maps to see where they are in relation to each other. GIS allows you to get your properties plotted at an address level so you can easily and accurately see where your properties are. A really important reason for doing this is that it clearly shows you how closely together your properties are. There are undoubtedly many examples where two properties might have a different street name, a different postcode, or even a different local authority, but are in fact only meters apart. GIS allows you to break down the man-made divisions that are imposed on your data so that you can focus purely on the geography of where your properties are in relation to each other. This is something you would not be able to do if you relied on spreadsheets alone. This can make your organisation much more efficient when planning repair jobs because it means you can identify opportunities for doubling up on jobs. For example, you might be sending your maintenance team to one property to fit a new plug socket when you notice that a property in the adjacent street also needs a new plug socket. By doing two jobs in one, you can handle your workload much more efficiently. Our second key use case today is identifying land ownership and areas of responsibility. So GIS land registry data shows you the owner of all commercially owned land in the UK. This means that you can get a definitive view of all the properties and land owned by your organisation. We often hear from customers that by viewing their land ownership data in GIS highlights certain assets like a property or a garage that they hadn't previously realised they owned. Seeing what land is owned by other organisations is also really useful. For example, you might see a property of yours which is nowhere near any of your other properties, but is near to a cluster of another housing association properties or vice versa. This knowledge can be really helpful because you can use it to suggest a stock acquisition or disposal, or even a stock swap that suits both parties. Knowing who owns what can also save you money on your grounds maintenance costs. For example, you might see a patch of grass you maintain that is also accessed by properties owned by a second housing association. You can use this information to pass some of the costs of maintaining that grass onto the other organisation. Identifying land ownership can also be really useful for working out who's responsible. This could be in relation to who's responsible for maintaining a patch of grass, or perhaps who's responsible for fixing damaged fences after a storm. So our third use case is negotiating grounds maintenance contracts. Housing associations are responsible for maintaining areas of land and there's a cost involved in this. This could be either by running your own ground maintenance team or subcontracting the work to a third party. Either way, knowing how much land you have to maintain and the type of land it is really important to understand your grounds maintenance costs. This is especially important for when you subcontract the work, as it ensures you're getting good value for money. Knowing how much your grounds maintenance is costing is also really important when passing these costs on to your tenants. Being able to say definitively how much an area of grass costs to maintain means that you can calculate service charges for your residents as fairly as possible. Having an objective framework for this means that you can evidence costs, which can be useful if residents ever question why they're paying as much as they are. Different land types also have different upkeep costs. Using GIS, you can model how changing the land type of an area, for example, moving from grass to hard standing, will impact your grounds maintenance costs before making the change in real life. Finally, locating flood risk. So using GIS, you can use 3 data sets to work out which of your properties are at risk to flooding and which properties might be at risk in the future. This is obviously really important as it allows you to future-proof your properties by making at-risk properties more resilient to flooding. This could mean replacing ground floor carpets with hard floors and moving plug sockets further up the wall. It can also be useful when looking to invest in either new or existing properties. GIS means you can check the flood risk of a property before you buy it. It also means you can check the risk of a property before planning additional works. For example, do you want to install a new boiler on a property if there's a flood risk in the next 10 years? This all allows you to protect the value of your property portfolio. So hopefully you're now all thinking, great, those use cases sound amazing, but how do I actually do it? At CADcorp, we help our customers manage their GIS system however it works for them, which broadly means choosing one of these 2 paths. So path 1, manage in-house, is used when the customer is more confident in their technical expertise and has the time to dedicate some of their week to GIS. CADcorp set up and configure the system and provide introductory and administration training, OS data, and technical support when required, but the overall responsibility to manage the system falls with the customer. With this path, the software can be either hosted by us or deployed on the site. With path 2, introduction training is still provided, but CADcorp take more responsibility and administrate the system on behalf of the customer. For example, in path 1, CADcorp would simply supply the data, whereas in path 2, we would supply the data, load it into a spatial database for you, and keep it maintained and up to date. This is really good when a customer either lacks the time or the expertise to do this themselves. So we're now going to move on to the second part today, where Simon is going to show you some of the use cases I've spoken about in action. Simon, when you're ready, over to you.
Thank you, George. So I'll just share my screen and I'll make a start. Okay, yep. So this morning I'm going to share a selection of examples of why GIS is extensively used in the housing sector. And to demonstrate these examples, this morning I'm going to share these across two different GIS platforms. So first of all, we're going to have a look at a desktop GIS platform. I'm going to talk a little bit about the data and then run through just some of the types of analysis that you can perform with that application. And then we'll move on to the second application, which we'll be looking at sort of web mapping, where this is an interface that you can share across your organization so everybody can kind of get access to mapping. And I'll also share some more use cases within that platform as well. So let's start off. So the first platform I'm going to use is CADcorp Sys Desktop, and this is a desktop GIS. And it is often used by a GIS administrator or maybe a business analyst to perform a variety of tasks. And that might be just to simply visualize data, maybe capture new data, print maps, or maybe perform spatial analysis. And in terms of the interface, excuse me, and we've adopted the Microsoft Fluent ribbon at the top. So it looks very similar to Microsoft Office products, making it easy to adopt and navigate around the application itself. Now, if you're at the beginning of your sort of GIS journey, there are probably 3 key data sets to get started. So number 1 is having your properties geocoded. Number 2 will be licensing Ordnance Survey mapping. And then number 3, perhaps acquiring land registry ownership data. Now, the first one I mentioned was, geocoding your properties. So in simple terms, it's a process of getting a list of all of your properties, assigning coordinates to each property so that you can display their locations on the map. And it might look something like this, just providing a view of where your assets are located. But these sort of simple points on the map also provide a really good stepping stone to a lot of opportunities with GIS, because if you imagine linking this location data to information you're storing in your housing or asset management systems, which store a lot of information about your properties, that information can be fed into the GIS for visualization and analysis. And we'll see a couple of examples this morning. The second data set I mentioned to kind of support your property point type data is the need for sort of Ordnance Survey mapping. And fortunately, with the Ordnance Survey, we do have some free mapping that we can use, and we all like free stuff. So the background map that we see in this particular project file at the moment is their Zoom Stack product, which is one of their free maps. And at this scale, it's really nice for this particular scale of mapping. But when you perhaps want to zoom into a property level, zoom into a particular estate, then you're going to probably want the Ordnance Survey master map data. And this is the sort of the mapping that we see underneath these red property points. Now, this one isn't free. It is a licensed data set, but there are cost-effective ways to license master map without sort of breaking the bank. And generally speaking, you would only license a small area around your property points, because that is all you need. But the kind of the value add for this particular data set is the ability to use it for data capture purposes, and I'll show a very quick use case of that very shortly. And then the third data set I mentioned was land registry ownership. So yeah, using your company name or aliases or previous names you may have had, you can search and acquire all of the land registry sort of title areas that are registered under those names. And in this particular example, these red areas represent a different sort of title ownership. I've also labeled them here with the title number. But this is, key to understand as an organization, what land you own, what you're responsible for, and that information can be critical for different areas of the business. So yeah, those are sort of the three most common data sets you require if you're at the beginning of your GIS journey. And yeah, if you want to find out more about these, we can help with the supply of these. Just pop a few comments in the exit survey at the end and we can be in touch with you. So let's take a look at some sort of use case examples. And yeah, one of the most popular use cases for GIS in housing is grounds maintenance, and it's often sort of the first project to get sort of GIS off to a winning start, and that's because it's a critical part of your day-to-day responsibilities. But it can also bring cost savings as well. I was actually on site with one of our customers last week, and they saved annually £30,000 simply by using GIS, and that was just for a grounds maintenance project alone. So that paid for the kind of the GIS solution in year one, and then in subsequent years they benefited from those savings that the GIS created for them. And that's kind of where that value add comes in from the master map data, because you can digitize your grounds maintenance data with that background map. And in the software, there are lots of sort of different options to do this. I will show you a very sort of quick example using sort of a clever process I've created in this project. So here we've got this sort of land parcel on the map. This is an area of grass that we need to cut, or we cut. I want to add that to our records. So I'm going to go to the Create tab, use this little point option here. I can click anywhere on the mapping, and it grabs that parcel and then copies it into my grounds maintenance records. And then to accompany that feature we see there on the map, I also want to record some information against it. So if I go to this particular view here, I'm actually recording 5 pieces of information against every grounds maintenance asset. So the first one, what type of asset is the land parcel? So let's say this is an area of grass. So I can type that in and record that. And by recording that, the map has styled that land parcel accordingly. I'm also capturing, very importantly for grounds maintenance, the area in square meters. And then the last 2 examples, we call them kind of spatial lookups or location lookups. And they're basically looking at another overlay and then grabbing some service information from them. So if I just sort of zoom out the map and just turn on that other overlay. So this is an overlay showing kind of our service charge areas. And what the GIS is doing is it's taking this piece of grass, it's worked out which service charge area it falls within, and then it grabs some information to record against it. So it's pulling the sort of the service charge name and the service charge code. So yeah, using the GIS, you can create your very own sort of digital atlas of grounds maintenance. And that information feeds nicely into calculating those maintenance costs, whether it's for internal use or perhaps you're negotiating contracts externally. And because we've used that master map data, we've got accurate measurements, and then we can accumulate those measurements using the GIS. And there are a number of different ways we could do that. We could visualize those measurements on the map. So here I'm using a label here. So in this particular service charge area, I've accumulated the total amount of grass that we need to cut within this particular area. Or more than likely, you want to kind of extract all of this aggregated information from the GIS, so you can calculate your costings externally. If I just change my view, so here we've got a little table view here. each row is a different service charge area, and I have all of the accumulations by different assets there. I can export that to CSV and use that for costings outside of the mapping solution. Or another popular option is to report using sort of PDF maps. And we have wizards in the software where you can create sort of an individual map for each estate. And we also have a little free sort of book plotter tool where that can automate that PDF map production. So it can create a map for every service charge area and then just whack it into one PDF document. And if I just sort of show you an example, so in my demo data, I've only got 2 service charge areas. So I've got this map. It's for Hamilton Close. We've got our service charge boundary on the map, our property points. We can also see our grounds maintenance responsibilities. And then on the right, I've also included the accumulations. And then if I jump to page 2, and we then move on to our second service charge area. And this approach has been used by some of our customers to provide maps when sort of tendering for external grounds maintenance contracts. And then just before I sort of finish off this ground maintenance use case, I just wanted to sort of mention another possibility. So yeah, in the software, we've got tools so you can, capture your grounds maintenance sort of records yourself. But if you are starting from scratch, an alternative approach could be to license a new sort of Ordnance Survey data set, and it's called NGD land, and it's a data set that identifies land cover. And I'll just open up the sort of the legend behind my styling here. And this data set basically has a variety of sort of land cover classifications. So it includes areas of grass, it includes trees, hard surfaces, steps, and there are actually more sort of classifications which aren't shown in this particular legend. So potentially NGD land could be, a starter for 10 to sort of have a data set for sort of grounds maintenance. You probably will still need to make some changes to it, but it could be a very good sort of time saver and perhaps worth exploring. So yeah, worth a consideration. And yeah, we could explore this further with you if it's of interest. So yeah, to summarize, there's a reason why grounds maintenance is often a primary use case for GIS, especially at the beginning of a GIS journey, because you're moving away from overinflated costs calculated from paper maps to a digital record, which can provide accurate measurements and therefore lead to more accurate costings for the work. Okay, so let's change tact and we're just zooming out to Brighton here and return to a view of our properties. And I want to share sort of 2 use case examples looking at tenancy turnover and repairs. And this is where GIS becomes a very powerful tool because it can identify patterns or trends in your data that you wouldn't necessarily see elsewhere. So let's look at sort of tenancy turnover, and we've had sort of recent conversations with housing customers who want to analyze this with GIS. So on the map, I've got my properties color coded based on the number of tenancies they've had. And if I just sort of expand my legends just to see the different colors and their associated number of tenancies. Now, perhaps we want to use the mapping to focus on those sort of worst offending properties in terms of tenancy turnover. So in the software, we can have a different view of the data. So using our query builder, I can say, let's look at our data. I want to filter the view of the data and look at those properties which have had the highest number of tenancies. And when I apply that filter, we can now see a view of those properties with high turnover. So, and straight away we can perhaps see some groups of properties in close vicinity to each other. So straight away, you're perhaps wondering, why is that the case? Why do we have a particular problem here? We could, deep dive into these properties and look at other aspects that might be causing this. And I'll actually explore one of these avenues very shortly. But for now, GIS can also provide alternative views for the data. So maybe we've done this analysis, but we need to show a breakdown of these properties by housing officer patches. So I've just turned on an overlay here of some boundaries which show our officer patches. And I need to establish how many of these high turnover properties fall within each of these areas. So in the software, we have another wizard that can do that analysis simply and quickly. So against my boundaries here, I can launch a wizard. Oh, excuse me. I'll turn it off. Here's my boundaries. Here I can say, okay, I want to count the number of properties within each of these areas, and then click finish. And that analysis has now been performed. And if I use the info button and click on this neighborhood area on the left, it tells us there are 10 properties with high turnover in that particular area. And then in the center one here, if I click on that, it tells us there are 21. And we can use the GIS to create a visualization of that analysis by adding a theme. So I can color code each of these areas based on that count. So using the add theme wizard, I'm going to grab those boundaries. I'm going to use a range theme. I'm going to grab that column where we've counted the number of high turnover properties. And then in this view here, we're going to divide the count into 4 different groups. And then in the last part of the wizard, I can choose how I want to style these boundaries. So I'm going to keep a black outline, but to show sort of the count of properties, I'm going to grab a color ramp. And within here, I'm going to use a set of red. So the darker the red, the higher the count. And then once I've applied that visualization, we can kind of see 2 patches which appear to have the highest count. And a bit like the grounds maintenance example I showed you earlier, I can sort of turn on a label there just to provide some additional context. And just by visualizing the analysis in this way, we perhaps have some insight into this particular problem and where we should focus our attention. So yeah, I've used the map there to identify a problem, but we could also use the map to identify reasons why by analysing different variables that might be causing high turnover. And I'm going to focus on one sort of variable today, and that is repairs. So maybe a reason why we have a problem is because tenants are unhappy about the quality of homes. You know, do they require regular repairs? So we could use a map to display our repairs data. We may be able to draw some conclusions from this view, but it can be difficult when you've got lots of data like this. So perhaps an alternative view is to view the data as a cluster. Maybe we can start to see some patterns emerge. Maybe we can see some locations where we've had high numbers of repairs. Or to visualize the data in a different way, you can also use the application to create a hotspot. And this type of analysis can also highlight kind of areas where we've had high concentration of repairs and kind of show where they're occurring frequently. And in this example, the red and orange are the hotspots. And if we actually complete that, compare that analysis with our view of those high turnover properties, we can actually start to see a pattern. You know, we've got a high concentration of repairs where we also have a significant grouping of high turnover properties. And that's the sort of the type of insight that GIS can deliver. And by identifying, you know, a catalyst for the problem, you can then take appropriate action to tackle it. And then just whilst we're looking at repairs, for maybe a short-term view, you could also use the map to display any open repair jobs. Here I'm using a cluster technique again, just to kind of visualize our current workload of jobs, you know, see where they are. You may use this to manage the tasking of jobs to engineers based on location. However, you know, we are aware there are specialist applications for job scheduling, but it can still be a very useful view for colleagues to see the current state of play with repairs. And it's also a view that you could share in the web mapping application, which I'm coming to next. So I'm now going to leave the desktop GIS platform. I've shown you a selection of its capabilities, looking at use cases for viewing sort of land ownership and managing grounds maintenance, and then just looking at some of the different ways you can analyze your data using tenancy turnover and repairs as examples. Okay, so let's move on to the second platform that I want to share with you today, and that's CAD Corp Sys Web Map. And this application is ideal for sharing your location data and analysis across your organization in a really user-friendly interface. For example, it could be your contact center looking at grounds maintenance because talking to a tenant on the phone who's complaining about an area of grass that's overgrown, they could use the map check if that grounds maintenance is your responsibility, and then deal with that inquiry accordingly. And it's also a very capable product as well, with lots of options. It caters for different needs. It could just be used to look at data, could be used to create PDF maps. You can also perform your own spatial searches on data as well. And if you're interested in seeing the full capabilities of WebMap, we can arrange a one-to-one demonstration with you. Again, just put some comments in the exit survey at the end. So yeah, what I want to do now with WebMap is just cram a few more use cases in before handing you back to George. And we're going to have a focus on sort of decarbonisation and flood risk. So yeah, GIS and mapping is actively being used to help with decarbonisation agenda. And yeah, part of that includes improving the energy efficiency of your homes. And to kind of help with that work, there are some data sets that you can tap into. This first example is EPC data. I've shared this example in previous webinars, but it's still very much current, and it can be used to view and analyze your EPC performance, but most importantly, identify those worst performing properties. You know, where are they? Do we have groups of these properties in close vicinity to each other? That can help with the delivery of retrofit projects by targeting specific areas at a time, and helping us to be efficient and kind of maximize our sort of capital spend for that sort of greater impact. Another data set that you could consider exploring is a new one from the Ordnance Survey, and it's the NGD buildings data set. So I'm just zoomed into an estate here. Now, this is another Ordnance Survey data set. It is licensed, but it does have a lot of rich attribution that you could really benefit from. So one of the attributes is construction material. So the data set contains building polygons, and one of the attributes is the construction material. So that could be really helpful to identify those hard to heat homes and target them for specific insulation programs. They also do the same for roof material as well. This is a new addition to the data. So again, you can repeat that analysis, and we know different materials can significantly impact a building's energy performance. So yeah, we can use the data to identify the worst properties for that. And then also a new addition to the data can also help with solar EV projects. So if you're considering sort of solar panels for your properties, you'll need to assess their viability, and I guess first and foremost, identify which properties would be suitable for them. One of the attributes in the building's data is roof shape. So it distinguishes whether the roof is flat or pitched. And for those roofs that are pitched, then you'll need some further information to check their suitability. And as we all are aware, you know, in the UK, a south-facing roof provides the optimum aspect for sort of maximizing that energy generation and maximizing that sunlight exposure for solar panels. And in this particular view, I've color coded the buildings based on their aspect, and those in green are shown as south facing. If I were to interrogate one of the buildings, and if we look at the details at the bottom here, the data tells us, yep, it's got a pitched roof. It tells us the total area of that pitched roof, but it also tells us how many square meters are facing south. And I read online that an average sort of solar panel installation requires somewhere between 20 to 30 square meters. So that data can allow you to find those south-facing roofs and those which have sufficient space for solar panels. And then, yeah, you've got the southeast, southwest, west and east aspects as well. They are all viable, but yeah, they'll obviously get less exposure to the sun. And then when I was reading more about solar panel installation, as you do, roof material also makes a difference as well. So just going back to that roof material attribute, apparently some are more difficult than others to install solar panels on. So yeah, returning back to this attribute here can help with that particular assessment. And then another consideration is shading. So, you know, is there anything around the property that might cast shadows over the roof and block that sort of block the sunlight on the roof? And that building's data set includes building height information. So, you know, use that data to find any tall buildings around your properties that could cause shading. And in this particular view, I grabbed all buildings within sort of a 50-meter radius of my land ownership. And in a similar vein, you know, viewing your tree data as well, and repeating that analysis, looking for trees that could cause shading on a roof. So yeah, a couple of examples there of sort of using the EPC data and looking at some of the rich attribution from the NGD buildings data, which could help with decarbonisation projects. So let's just finish off. I'm going to zoom out to Brighton. We're going to take a look at one more use case around sort of environmental risk and sort of weather events. And yep, the most significant risk we probably have in our country is the risk of flood. And with the GIS, you can use free to use flood mapping data from the Environment Agency to find any of your properties that fall within these flood risk areas, so that you can understand, you know, the risks that you might have and how you might mitigate against that risk. And that can help facilitate mitigation plans to deal with any potential emergency scenarios. And the Environment Agency also have the historic flood map as well. Again, that is a free open data set which you can tap into, and you can also use that to sort of visualize actual historical flood events alongside your property data. And then continuing on with sort of weather events, and you know, they appear to be more frequent nowadays, especially sort of storm events with gale force winds. Obviously that could bring a risk to trees felling, so returning back to our tree data, just an alternative use case, you know, understanding their location and the condition of them, and also their potential vicinity to property, you know, is all key to perhaps mitigate their risk against property and people if, you know, we had strong gales. And then sort of in the aftermath of a storm event, you know, it's not unusual for fences to be blown down. So having your land ownership, having your T marks captured and displayed on the map is very important to help you understand who's responsible for repairing or replacing them. And also this type of map can help your legal teams deal with any sort of neighbour disputes as well. So across both the desktop and web mapping platforms, I've shared a variety of applications and use cases for GIS. And to be honest, there are many more I could have demonstrated today if I had the time. But I would like to just finish off my demonstration just by showing you a clever insight tool for web map. And it's called Local Knowledge. And in simple terms, you know, yourself, a colleague, could use the map and go to a particular location of interest. So let's go to a different estate. From the main menu, they could run local knowledge. And what local knowledge does is it grabs the kind of the center location of the map, it queries your data, and then presents that insight on the left-hand side in this sort of neat little view. And in this example, I've asked it to query some of the different sort of use case examples I'm shared today. So basically at this location, can you tell me our land registry ownership? Can you tell me what title it is? I can hit this icon and view sort of that title boundary here on the map. For this, you know, service charge area as well, or location, here I've got the accumulation of grounds maintenance assets. Scrolling down, I've got a summary of those sort of tenancy turnover stats for this area. I could be displaying numbers around our repairs. How many open repairs do we have? How many are related to this particular location? I could use local knowledge to give us a breakdown of EPC performance for this area. And then just one more example, yeah, just showing that sort of solar EV potential as well. So here, give me a count of properties based on their roof aspect, and only showing those that have sufficient space for solar panel installation. And that view can be tailored to any mapping data, providing that real quick insight based on location. And yeah, it just provides that portal to bring that spatial data to life and provide that valuable sort of intelligence that decision makers can use. So I'm now going to bring my demonstration to a close. So I hope you found those examples beneficial, and just shows the type of application and benefits of using GIS. So yeah, thank you for your time. I'll now pass you back to George for a summary, followed by a Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That was really good. So just to wrap up and finish off, so you've seen some really good examples of GIS and how it can be used for housing. So hopefully you know a lot more about GIS now and a lot more about how it can benefit your organisation. GIS is more than just a pretty map though, so there are lots and lots of really good use cases. Some of that Simon has shown, and I hope we've also shown that whatever your level of expertise, GIS can be the answer for you, either by managing the system in-house or leaning on our expertise. So what are your next steps? So as I say, you've seen some really good examples today, and hopefully have a really good idea about how it can benefit your organisation. I'd love to set up a short meeting to hear more about your organisation and to talk about some of the other ways we can help you. So my email is on the bottom of your screen now, along with some dates in the next couple of weeks. So please get in touch to suggest a time that works for you, and we can take it from there. So that brings an end to the content today, but I know we've had lots of really good questions in the Q&A panel. We've got a couple of minutes, so I'll try and answer as many of those questions as I can now. If there's anything we don't have time for today, I'll be sure to follow up via email. So first of all, really good question from Emma asking, do organisations need an expert in-house to utilise GIS? So a good number of our current customers do have GIS experts. I know there's a few of them here today. But the answer is no. So it kind of depends how you want to use the system. So we spoke about the two paths earlier, with kind of the manage in-house option and there's a lean on our expertise option. So we also have lots of customers who may not be GIS experts, but using the help and support we can provide, they're still able to kind of run and kind of benefit the organisation by using GIS. So it really depends on your organisation. If you've got a GIS expert or not, you can still use GIS. Question from Andy, can CAD Corp connect to our housing management system? So again, the answer is yes. So we can help you set up a process where you automatically extract data from your housing management system and put it into GIS. This can be kind of a dynamic link. So kind of when your data is updated in your housing management system, the changes are reflected in the CAD Corp software. And then question from Thomas asking, are CAD able to obtain land registry data that references ownership? So yes, again, is the answer. So yeah, we can license you to use this kind of land registry data, tells you who owns all of the commercial properties in the UK. So please get in touch and we can talk about that further. And finally, a question from John. So John's asking, I think this relates to the example Simon showed in SIS desktop, where it had the count of repairs and in different zones. And the question is, how would you account for the density of properties with regard to turnover and repairs? Obviously, the idea being that a bigger area is more likely to have more repairs. So yeah, what you can do is, Simon just showed you the count of how many repairs in each zone, but you can easily divide the count by either the area of zone or the number of properties you own in that zone to kind of take the area of the zone out of the equation. Okay, so we're just about out of time, so we'll bring things to a close. Before you leave though, please remember to answer our exit survey, which should appear on your screen now. There are 3 parts of the survey, so please remember to click through each part. As I say, we find it really useful to get your feedback on our webinars. So yeah, please just take a couple of minutes to do that for us. So thank you for attending today. I hope you found it really useful and hopefully we'll speak soon. Thank you.